Okay.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Alison Smith. I am the Cake Crusader, and I'm going to be taking you for a little trip around afternoon tea today. So we'll have a little look at tea, and then we'll see how I have used tea in my business and maybe how you could too. So here we go. This is today's menu. So first of all, we'll have a look at the origins of afternoon tea. We'll have a look at its geography and its elements, and then how it can be commercialized. So that's what we're going to do. So afternoon tea origins. It started with this woman. So Anna Russell, who was the Duchess of Bedford, she used to get this sinking feeling, particularly when she was staying with her friend, the Duke of Rutland, at Belvoir Castle. So the daily routine there is you would have breakfast at 8 o'clock, you'd have a light lunch at noon, and then you wouldn't have your dinner until 8 or 9 at night. And around the afternoon, around 3 or 4 o'clock, she got a terribly rumbly tummy. And she literally used to describe it as her sinking feeling. And so what she did, she actually requested that light food would be brought to her chambers. So bread and butter and biscuits, which are English biscuits, not American biscuits. So they're these wafer things, more like cookies, as opposed to something you have with gravy, and some Darjeeling tea. And that became what she did every afternoon. And then upon returning home to Bedfordshire, she started inviting friends around for afternoon tea. And so they would all bowl up and they would share in this light meal, which again helped their sinking feelings too. Now, the first afternoon teas were actually technically low teas because they were served in a boudoir. So a boudoir is a lady's private sitting room, and it's between the bedroom and the dining room. So if you think about a stately home, you know, you would have the wing that was the ladies' wing, and the wing that was the lord's wing, and there was, you know, a suite of rooms in the middle. The boudoir was in between two of these things, and it really comes from the French verb which means to sulk or withdraw. So a boudoir is a place where you go to withdraw. So everything else is going on all around the house, and you go to the boudoir to withdraw and to sulk. It later became a place where, because all your friends would come around in the afternoon, it was a place to share gossip and scandal and intrigue pre-Facebook. So what would be served in these afternoons in the boudoir, in the low tea, would be small bite-sized pieces of food and tea, and it will be served on low decorative tables and low chairs, hence low tea. So it could also be known as having tea at home. All right, so that was really the original afternoon tea. Then what happened in time is that afternoon tea really spread to all demographics. And so once it got to the working class couldn't come in from the fields at 4 o'clock and have a low tea. So in fact, what they did is they had their tea / dinner a little later. And this was called a high tea because you would have more substantial things to eat, and thus you would need to have it at a table and chairs. So this is served on a high table, and thus it's a high tea. So when people now refer to afternoon tea as high tea, they're actually talking about having something that's more like dinner, as opposed to a high tea, which will be an afternoon tea. So really, high tea is the more substantial cousin of the afternoon tea. So you've got two types there. So let's have a look at the geography of afternoon tea, so where all this happened. And I have a question for you. So what did Chanel have to do with tea? Chanel.
The designer?
Yep, the designer.
Perfume?
Not quite. The clue is in the picture, in the fuzzy picture.
Roses?
No, but kind of close. So Chanel's flower was a camellia, and tea is a camellia. So it's either Camellia sinensis or Camellia assamica. And the origins are in southwest China. It was a forest shrub. And tea is largely grown in equatorial climates. And it really thrives between 15 degrees south and 30 degrees north. So you can see on the little thing at the bottom, that is the tea belt. And the largest producers of tea are China and India and Kenya and Sri Lanka. So it's just in those places that tea is really, really well known, but it's a camellia. So, you know, your lovely camellias that you have in the garden, it is related. And the sinensis is the small leaf variety, and the assamica is the broadleaf variety from which we get all of our teas. Now, tea, as it was popularized, a lot of it had to do with the marriage in 1662 of Charles II of England to Catherine of Braganza from Portugal. So in her dowry, she bought tea, and the English had never seen tea before, never drunk it before, but immediately got introduced into the upper echelons of society as being something which is really something very special. And Charles II was really a bit of a racketeer, frankly, and he knew how to extort things from large companies. The East India Trading Company was one of the largest companies that were operating at the time, and basically he had a system of tea for favors. And so again, he kind of got the monopoly on tea. And so because tea entered the domain of the English royalty, it spread like the English empire. So we don't grow it, we had nothing to do with it, but because we took over places that had a lot of tea, we got to control a lot of wherever it went. And so, you know, tea and the British Empire really became synonymous. And this is what the British Empire looked like. So the red bits, the deep red bits, is land fully controlled by the Brits. The stuff that is just slightly kind of peachy is the stuff we lost before the 18th century. The more pink stuff is military occupation. So if you see, we had a lot of the world that was under our control. And so tea spread. As the British moved around, so tea spread around, and our tea culture moved around too. Another geographical thing I want you to pay attention to is this. So England, as you know, is shaped like that strange little quizzical blob just off the edge of Europe. And right at the toe end, there are two counties, Cornwall at the end and Devon. And if you look at where they're situated in the British Isles, they're a lot more southern than the rest of the British Isles, so they're warmer. And they also are absolutely renowned for their dairy, right? So because the cows eat this lovely green grass, because of the Gulf Stream that comes across the Atlantic, everything's lovely and lush and green, which is exactly why Ireland is lush and green too. These counties get the same kind of effect. But anyway, there is huge animosity between Devon and Cornwall because they're both at the butt end of the UK, and they like to kind of one up each other. But particularly what they one up each other on is this. So in Devon, you put your cream on your scone first, and in Cornwall, you put your jam on your scone first.
Oh
and
my.
you can really tell the outsiders by how they dress their scones. All right. So I just thought it's really got nothing to do with afternoon tea. I just think it's kind of funny.
Oh yeah.
All right. So the afternoon tea elements. So let's go through some of those. So in the beginning, as you remember, poor Anna with the rumbly tummy, she just requested bread and butter and some biscuits and some tea. So in the beginning, it all started with bread and butter. And then the bread and butter took two very distinct routes. It took a savory route into finger sandwiches and open sandwiches and sausage rolls and quiche and pies. Okay, so you can see how those things kind of string together. A sausage roll, by the way, is just a sandwich that has a sausage or sausage meat in it and has a pastry cover as opposed to a bread cover. Okay, and then bread and butter that took a sweet route went towards sweet buns, like hot cross buns that Jessica from Nana's Bakery makes so well, and to scones. And scones, by the way, in the UK are often not highly flavored. They're more of a plain, semi-sweet vehicle for jam and cream. So the big thing is about what you put on your scone as opposed to the flavor of the scone itself. And another thing actually is that the British fight about whether it's a scone or a scone, because those are the kind of things that we like to fight about. And also bread and butter that took the sweet route, going into the hot puddings. All right, so going into bread and butter pudding, tiny puddings that you can put in little individual ramekins or containers that could be bought out for your afternoon tea. So if when you think about afternoon tea, if you drill it back in your mind to the fact that it was once bread and butter, and take the savory route and the sweet route, you'll always be able to have plenty of options as to what you're going to do with it, because the choices are just really unlimited. So food and beverage elements for afternoon tea. So definitely tea. Doesn't have to be a caffeinated tea, could be a herbal tea, could be something like that. And much more recently, bubbles. So some Prosecco or some pink sparkling wine or whatever. It's a really nice addition to an afternoon tea. Savories, so maybe pastries or little quiches or things like that. Sweets, so definitely scones, maybe some little fancies, some little biscuits. They have to be all very small, right? Because it's a light meal and everything has to be a delight for the senses. So to look at and to smell and to taste and to touch. So unwrapping things is often a big thing within afternoon teas. Hearing that cork pop out of the champagne bottle, even hearing the tea being poured into your cup. It's really a sort of multi-sensory experience, and is one in which really no expense and very little ostentatiousness is spared. So you use your best china and you use your best silver and all of the bits that you have. It's just a delight for the senses. So other distinctive elements of afternoon tea, as I said, the china. So typically in a household, we have at least one set of china, and some people have many that they've inherited from grandparents and parents and aunts and whatever. And afternoon tea is the time to get it out. And much more commonly these days, people are actually mixing and matching their china. So rather than having just one set of everything, they're doing what we have here in the little picture on the left, which is to really mix it up a bit. And what's astonishing is afternoon tea is the only meal that has its own china. If you think about it, everything else you use equally between meals. Afternoon tea has its own very distinctive set of stuff. It has a teapot and a water jug and small plates and side plates and serving accoutrements and whatever. So it really is quite special. The next thing is afternoon tea silver. So lots of the serving materials are made out of silver, sometimes gilt, but often silver. And often you have very tiny teaspoons and cake forks. And the cake forks are the ones that have that thing that looks like a knife on the side, so that you can use it either to cut or to scoop. So the afternoon tea silver is important. One of the things about afternoon tea silver is you always have to polish it before you use it. So it was, again, it was another sign of intense wealth, because I mean, who amongst the general populace could afford to come in from the fields and polish their silver? So it was really a status symbol. If you could have silver, then you could afford somebody to polish that silver for you. Afternoon tea linens are typically white. So you have white tablecloths, white napkins, because the real show stealer is the items themselves, and maybe your china. So it's really, white linen provides a lovely backdrop for it. So quite plain. Of late, napkins have become much more decorative, and it's also much more acceptable to use paper napkins, because some of them are just really, really beautiful, beautiful artistic pieces for the afternoon teas. And of course, tiered stands. You don't serve anything else on a tiered stand other than an afternoon tea, and typically it's 3 tiers. So you could just bring a stand over that would have your savories and your scones and your sweets, or you could have your afternoon tea in all kinds of different servings. So, you know, you would have a first course and a second course and whatever, but tiered stands are very, very common. And also just dressing up with your besties. It really is, because because afternoon tea is an event, right? Wearing your best clothes and the hat and whatever is really an important part of afternoon tea. So those are the elements of afternoon tea, both in terms of you know, what you will eat and drink, but also the other elements that surround it. So afternoon tea is really a unique experience with many elements, and it's the only meal that you can discern from afar. So if you think about it, if you saw people sitting down eating, you wouldn't really know if they were having breakfast, lunch, dinner, or anything else. You would know if they were having afternoon tea. So this thing is very, very distinctive. Okay. So let's have a look at the commercialization of afternoon tea. And where I'm going to start with that is actually a book that was written in the late 90s about the experience economy. And the experience economy is showing the progression from commodities to experiences. So a commodity is really something which is an undifferentiated product. So in our case, I want some cake, right? A goods business is making some of that commodity more specialized. So I want a milk bar cake. Then a service business really takes a lot of the onus of how that thing is produced. I want a baker to bake a cake for me. And then the experience economy, the experience business, is really about taking it out of being cake and making it into something completely different. You're selling customers the feeling that they get when they're consuming the product, as opposed to just the product. And so this is what I was thinking about when I was designing my afternoon teas last year, because it's all very well making cake, it's all good, but if you could make an experience and sell an experience, how much different would that be? So the experience economy is projected to be worth 12 billion in 2023. So and you know, over the past few years, spending, particularly in the US, has shifted to experiences away from physical goods. So if ever we are in a place where we could capitalize on this shift, we are there. It is now, right? So it's really how could we do that? So, you know, in the case of afternoon tea, what we're doing is going from the commodity of cake to the experience of getting together with your besties, wearing your posh stuff with grandma's china and a nice silver, and, you know, spending some time together. And more, especially in, you know, in the middle of the pandemic and whatever, people are saying that experiences are really getting more and more valuable. Okay. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for us in this space. So the Cake Crusaders afternoon tea concept, when I was thinking about this last year, this is the brief that I set myself. So it's going to be a limited edition. I'm not going to do these forever. I'm going to do them for a certain period of time. It's going to be an afternoon tea for 4 people, right? So for 4 guests. It's going to have 3 bakery items. One will always be a scone, one will be a showstopper, and then there'll be something else, whatever that is. It will include all of the extras. So the client won't have to do anything other than add their best friends, boiling water, and grandma's tea set. Right?
Okay.
So everything would be provided by me to them other than those things. So the barriers to hopefully having them do this would be minimal. So I did 2 last year. The first was the splendid summer afternoon tea. And I started off by creating a whole bunch of social media teasers. And all I did was to use things that I had around my house that represented tea. You know, things like spoons and cake slices and the Buckingham Palace wooden spoon and some of my china, and I mixed it with images of fruits and flowers that I knew I wanted to use in the teas themselves. And then as I got closer and closer to launch, what I did was to become much more specific with my imagery. So I used a picture of a scone, and I used a picture of jam alongside, you know, the Union Jack and tea time, 3 o'clock. So I did a whole sequence of these for about a week. And then what happened was I started featuring the product. So I knew what the products were going to be. So we were going to have the scone, and for the splendid summer afternoon tea, it was a plain sweet scone, and I would serve it with Wilkin and Sons strawberry jam, which is imported from the UK. It's actually from a place called Tiptree in Essex, which is where my grandma grew up. And then we would use some luxury Devon clotted cream. So it was from one of those fighting places at the bottom of England. Clotted cream is shelf stable, right? So unlike some of the other creams that we have available, which are dairy, this thing, as long as it is still in its jar and the seal is intact, it is shelf stable. So I could use this in with no problem at all. The next item that I did was some rose water shortbread with white chocolate on top, and then some pistachio and rosebud pieces. And I did actually in the end use lavender. I hadn't had it by the time I got this picture, so I just put purple sprinkles on. But it was a mixture of, you know, the nuts and the herbs and the flowers, just to make them look pretty. And then the final product was a lemon fairy cake. So fairy cakes are what we call a nursery item in the UK. So they're what you serve at children's parties, and they actually look like little butterflies, right? So you cut a little hole in the top, put some lemon curd in the top, you cut the piece that you cut out into 2, you stick some buttercream on the top, you put those little wings in, and you just sprinkle it with some icing sugar. So all it is just a plain vanilla or a lemon cupcake. It's got a little drizzle of lemon curd a lemon buttercream, and just a lemon twist on top there. So those were the products that I offered. And then I launched them at parties with my friends so that I can get lots of pictures, right? So and of course my friends are always, yeah, I'll have the launch of the afternoon tea, and we dress everything up and we make it all look pretty, and people wear hats and whatever, but it's really great for marketing materials and marketing photos, because everybody's very excited. I don't show them what I'm going to do beforehand, and so they're all they're all genuinely having an exciting time. And again, it comes back to this whole experience thing that I'm trying to create. Yes, of course, I'm selling 3 types of cake. Yep, that's absolutely what I'm doing. But more importantly, what I'm trying to incite people to do is to have experiences like this with their friends. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the next one that I did was the awesome autumn afternoon tea. These were the teasers. So again, I knew what was going to happen. I was going to be using apples and cinnamon and things that look like acorns and caramel and hazelnuts and all of that kind of stuff. These were the products. So it was a Nutella scone that I served with more Nutella and some more clotted cream, because you can never have enough clotted cream. The little acorns are choux paste acorns. They have pumpkin spice buttercream. So literally all it is buttercream with a little cinnamon, a little ginger, and little orange. And then I dipped those bad boys in milk chocolate, and I rolled them in crushed pretzel to make them look like acorns. And there were 3 of those per serving. And then the last one, the final one, the apple rose, came out of some of my pie making that I had done last year. And these things just literally flew out of my house. People loved them so much. And so they're just, it's apple wrapped in puff pastry and baked. So it's a fully baked pie. And I served it with a drizzling caramel that people could put on it. So that was the hot piece. And then this was the launch photos and some of the photo shoot. So I'm pretty predictable in terms of what I'm going to do with the afternoon teas. I'm going to come up with the idea. I'm going to do some teasers. I'm going to create the product. Then I'm going to launch the product. And then for a very limited period, it was actually 2 weeks for the autumn afternoon tea, I'll just get them out of the doors. And what I have found is that some people just like doing afternoon teas. So they're like, I'm up for all of them. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what I'm serving. And so that I think is kind of exciting. But it gives them the license to do something different. And it gives me the opportunity to think about packaging and marketing in a slightly different way. So what you'll actually see in the boxes on the side here is I usually do a big 12 portion box, which has the baked goods in it. And then I do a smaller box that has all the jams, all the creams, all the teas. I have teas that match the particular afternoon tea, and napkins as well. So anything that's an extra, I put in the extras box, and then the baked goods I put in the big box. So that's what I did with afternoon tea.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What size baked goods did you use, since tea is supposed to be smaller and more petite?
Well, I actually did fairly regular size things that would fit in a cupcake case. Because again, we were also in the middle of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. So didn't particularly want people to be mauling things around or having to cut things, wanted them to be individually portioned for them. If I were going to serve an afternoon tea at home, I would do smaller things and more of them. But I think for the afternoon teas that I was selling, I wanted people to feel like they were paying for, or they were getting their money's worth. And so that's why I use slightly larger portions for that.
Yep. And that totally makes sense. I wanted to ask. So
Yeah. I also didn't use any sandwiches. And I don't know if we're allowed to sell sandwiches. I took the stance that people can probably make sandwiches if they wanted to. They probably wouldn't be able to bake some of this stuff. So
Yes.
I'll give them what they can't do, and then they can do what they want to do if they want to add sandwiches. But frankly, when you put those three things in your face, there's not a lot of room for a sandwich.
Yes.
So I finished with some thoughts for cottage food producers, which is to really think about, what product or service is solidly yours. So it comes from your heritage, it plays to your expertise, you have experience in it, you know a lot about it. And then how could you possibly transform those things into an experience? How would you design and promote and monetize that experience? And then when would you start? Because I think afternoon teas are definitely one way to go, but I can see lots of opportunity here,
Yeah. I know right now with lefse being kind of the hot topic now, you were right. And I actually have had people reaching out for Easter and wanting to know if I could do lefse or not. I'm like, well, I haven't had my recipe tested yet. I never said that, but I had the excuse of, I got a cast, sorry, can't do it.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking if it is still a hot thing and we don't have a recipe, I think I'm going to bring people into my kitchen and teach them how to make lefse, and they get to take the lefse with them. Yep.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's great.
And then at that point, I don't think it falls under cottage food anymore. That's just a different business, right?
I think it probably is. I think it probably is.
Yes. So.
But I mean, I know we have lots of people with lots and lots of diverse backgrounds. It would be so interesting to see if we could, get things from Asia and Africa, and wouldn't that be amazing if we could have a whole kind of raft of different experience offerings for people.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I was just thinking of all the Israeli things I could make.
Right.
Yep. And for me, I'm not even Norwegian. My husband is. I took up a lot of his stuff, so I actually started making different things because of his family. So I'm German and Dutch, and that's where my temper comes from.
And again, I mean, every one of the European countries has rich and deep food heritage, and people are very bound up in that. So to be able to create stuff that resonates with people and plays to their heritage, I think is very, very cool. There, that was Squiffy helping me do my PowerPoint this afternoon.
Aw, she's so cute.
So what kind of dog?
She is a Dachshund. So
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, a little spotted, dappled Dachshund.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Well, that was fascinating, and we really appreciate it, Alison.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
How about you, Jamie? Are you going to be using any of this information? I know I am.
Yeah, probably. I was just thinking mothers will be perfect. Yeah. No.
Yep, I'm even thinking Christmas tea.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I call on my British traditions. I get stuff over from the UK, but there must be stuff that you could pull over from Scandinavia, that you can pull over from Germany, and because the supply chains are so good now, I mean, you can get anything you want, actually.
Yes. I mean, all of the cocos I use are imported, and I use some very expensive cocoa, very expensive. Like my husband, the first time I bought it, I thought he was going to fall off his chair. So now my husband and his friend, a good friend of ours, they make fun of me whenever I order, or they know that I've gotten it, like a new box of it or something. They make huge fun of me. So yeah, you can get anything from anywhere. So
Yeah, you really can. You really can. And I think that actually makes it easier for us, because the perceived value of having things that are authentic from various places is very high, but the barriers to us doing it are coming down and down by the day. I mean, you know, Amazon.com has pretty much the world at its fingertips, really. So yeah, it's
well, and it's even so much as like when my daughter went to school out in Philadelphia, some of the gourmet shops out there that I was introduced to, like in South Philly in the Italian district and different things like that. Oh my gosh. And the teas and stuff that I brought back, it was like, oh my gosh, you know. It was kind of like when I did childcare and I went to a book fair, and literally, I kid you guys not, this was years ago, but I'll never forget, because I was at a national conference and they had this Scholastics book fair in LA in the convention center. I bought so many books, I blew the bearings out of my suitcase, and we were trying to taxi and take off, and they literally announced, we need to unload 100 pounds off this plane before we take off, folks. And I'm like, oh, just take my suitcase.
oh, that's perfect.
Doesn't really make you feel comfortable flying when they say they need to drop it by 100 pounds, but I'm like, yeah, that's probably my suitcase.
Oh dear, that is funny.
So that was me coming back from Philadelphia with all my little, you know, I have to have this, I have to have that, you know.
Yeah.
My daughter knew exactly where I'd want to go, so.
Yeah.
So have you been following along on the national conference at all?
I haven't. I've had a really busy week, so I haven't done any of that. But it's all online, right?
Yes, it is, and it's very interesting. Some of the people were talking about something called a subscription. I'm sorry, I have to take this phone call.
For cottage foods, doing subscription stuff, we have that starting down here with cookie subscriptions and different things like that. And once we're done with this lobbying, I am going to be all over that, because I'm really crossing my fingers and toes that this is the last year we have to. I mean, we'll always have to watch it to make sure that, and we'll be wanting to change things, don't get me wrong, but it's been a very intense lobbying season, and we would have thought that during COVID and being from home, it would be easier to do. We were like, yeah, this will be awesome. And there's been a lot of aspects that have streamlined us and made us more efficient in being able to reach out to more people. However, there are many days where Shelley and I, up until middle to end of March, we were having 3-4 meetings a day, multiple times during the week. And it was just like craziness. So I want to get into the subscription thing, because I know that's a huge one. So I'll be looking for that one. How about you, Jamie? What do you think of the national conference? You've been attending some of it.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah. I've only missed one so far today because we went up to Lynn's and got some cake supplies. But no, I really enjoyed it. And, you know, I've dabbled in the subscription thing. I tried to do cookie and cinnamon roll. I have one customer that does a monthly cinnamon roll, you know, and hopefully as I grow more, that might take on more as people realize, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. I had a customer who, whenever I did a Pie Day Friday, would always be first in line. And they actually said to me, will you do subscription? And the thing that stops me is I have so much else going on. I can't commit to doing it all the time. But you know, it's, and you know, the same with some of the afternoon tea people. I know if ever I pop one up, they're going to take it. So I guess that's some kind of a subscription. But I'm worried about the amount of flexibility that it might start taking away, you know.
Yeah, you have to be consistent. Although I was thinking we actually get a box from my sister-in-law from Israel, and it is around the subject is around every holiday that is coming. And all the products are things made in Israel. And so like this month it was about the honey that's made in the Judean Hills.
Mm-hmm.
And there's hair products and there's
Yeah.
chocolates and there's cookies and but everything revolves around milk and honey. And I was thinking that could be a interesting way to incorporate some kind of a subscription.
Yeah.
Well, and you think of what we're trying to do right now with cottage foods and the grant we've written, just think about doing seasonal subscriptions and being able to incorporate local foods with the products that you're making. You really want to take and you want to, if you want to, for lack of better words, capitalize on something.
Yeah.
Local foods and local, the locally grown foods, really people want to know where their products are coming from. So if you take something like that and then you take it along and you pair it with cottage foods, that would be a great thing to do.
Isn't that what Emily is doing? Emily at
Flour.
Yeah. She's doing something with her boxes, right? She does those wonderful appetizer boxes where she has
something similar.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's lots of different things a person could do.
Yeah.
So you just need your imagination.
Yep. And then you need consistency and you need to block off the time for it, because if you can't block off the time, you can't do it. I mean, I was very productive over the Christmas season, but like Shelly called one day and said, "Are you alive? I haven't heard from you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've just been rolling Lefsa and
with a broken arm."
Yeah. With 5 fractures. Yeah. No, that doesn't kill you, only makes you stronger, right?
Yeah, right. Something like that.
Something like that, or just
Well, I'm going to stop the recording now. I suppose we could have stopped a while ago.